Anzac Day 2012, the first time that Adelaide's Anzac March will come across the Torrens River and acknowledge a new memorial to one of the legends of the Gallipoli campaign, Simpson and his donkey. His extraordinary status grew from just 3 weeks' service from April 25th until he was shot in the chest and died in May of 1915. Now a slideshow of a very special visit by my family when we retraced the steps of my mother's dad. Private Bill Clark, my grandfather, stepped ashore on April 25th, 1915, our Anzac Day. The Dardanelles. For the British and the French Navy, it was going to be a simple onslaught and they'd go straight through to Istanbul along this seaway. Across the water, the Gallipoli Peninsula and the battlefield just a few kilometres on the other side. The 15th of March 1915, the naval enemy was turned back, and the Turks see it very much as the moment that led to the birth of their modern state. The base for many of us on our overnight tour from Istanbul, which is several hours by car or bus, is Çanakkale on the Asia side of the strait. It's close to Troy. That's why the horse that was used in the film is on their seafront. It's an attractive university and tourist town, and from there, across the strait by ferry, the pilgrimage begins. We were blessed with a clear and bright winter's day, evoking a surreal sense of beauty in such a hard and terrible place for the troops on both sides. We drove first along Brighton Beach. Perhaps this was where the landing was supposed to take place. Instead, the Anzacs, in a muddle in the dark, went ashore where the steep hillsides dropped straight into the sea. We first sensed the huge losses at Gallipoli in Beach Cemetery. It's just at one end of Anzac Cove. We hadn't even reached it yet. Private John Simpson, aged 22, is buried there. The 3rd Field Ambulance dressing station was just below on the beach, and that's where he was taking his casualties. They began using this cemetery on the first day, the 25th of April. Simple monuments like these adorn each of the many small cemeteries around the battlefield. Families paid threepence halfpenny, 3.5 pence per letter, to say something about a boy that would never come home. Next to the cemetery, a very moving monument which portrays simply the words of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the Turkish commander at Gallipoli who went on to become modern Turkey's first president. These are his words in 1934. You, the mothers who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. After having lost their lives on this land, they've become our sons as well. The bond between our two countries is truly felt at Gallipoli and, for that matter, wherever you go in Turkey. Just around the corner, Anzac Cove itself, just a small beach, 600 metres long. When we were there, it was somewhat marred by the construction of works which are about trying to hold back the erosion which has narrowed the beach. It was once 25 metres wide. This is Anzac Cove. This is where the boys scrambled up on April 25th. This is where it became the centre of action for months on end until the evacuation in December. You can only get to it really from the other end. The boys bathed here. The boys swam regardless, despite Beachy Bill, a giant artillery gun up the hill which showered them day after day. They kept on swimming. At the other end of Anzac Cove, Ari Banu Cemetery. Some of the first landings were happening here too. They were shot at as far out as 100 metres out in the sea. The dead were buried here from day one as well, some of them from hospitals on Anzac Cove or on North Beach in the distance. A lot of the dead were from the Light Horse. They fought at the neck way up on the heights. They're the ones portrayed in the Peter Weir film, Gallipoli. This was the original site of the Anzac Day ceremonies. In fact, in 1999, the last ceremony, 8,500 people crammed in. That's why they needed to move the ceremony to North Beach, under what the troops immediately called the Sphinx from their time in Egypt. It's a very simple place, a long wall with the word Anzac on it. A Turkish family visiting what is a very important place for them too. The dignitaries can look out over the Aegean or up towards the Sphinx, where 10,000, 12,000 or more people will cram in each Anzac Day. Then at the other end of Anzac Cove, Shrapnel Gully. This was a very important moment for me because this is where my grandfather, Private Bill Clark, spent a month before he copped some shrapnel in Shrapnel Gully and was sent home. This is the largest cemetery on the Gallipoli Peninsula for the Australians, and it began again in the first days and is in the same layout as was used during the war itself. The memorials in each of the cemeteries are very simple, and the cross of sacrifice is built within the memorial rather than up against the skyline. It's a gesture of conciliation because we're in a land of Islam. All along the route that Australians follow at Gallipoli, there are signs that tell us this is an important place for the Turks as well. These fields saw tens of thousands of their young men lost, as well as ours. A poignant memorial, which goes back to a story told by a young major. A Turkish soldier, under a white flag, took an Australian officer back to safety in his own trenches. That was a story told by Major Casey. He went on to become Governor-General Casey. Lone Pine is engraved in our minds as an important memorial for Australians at Gallipoli. The pine itself, well, the original was blown to smithereens in the campaign in August, but now this one, and many others in Australia, came from a pine cone found by Australian troops in a Turkish trench. Here in this space, a dreadful campaign in August saw the Australians take the top of the hill. Now it's very peaceful, but for the sounds of the Turkish maintenance workers who keep all the cemeteries in very beautiful condition. The graves are a powerful statement about the deaths here, but one can't imagine the horror of the trench-to-trench warfare. They were chucking grenades at each other. We were making them out of jam tins down on the beach. The Turks' grenades took a little longer to go off, and Australian infantrymen were catching them and throwing them back. That's the view from the top of Lone Pine right down towards Anzac Cove. That's where the Australians had to come up. This is a memorial to the 57th Regiment, completed only in 1992. They were told to hold the line while reinforcements were brought up by the Turks. They did. Almost the entire regiment was wiped out. One of the old veterans of Gallipoli on the Turkish side telling stories to a young girl. This is not just a place that Australians and New Zealanders visit. It's important to the Turks. The views from the top down past the Sphinx, down these incredibly sharp gullies, show us what a fiendish task it was to try to take the heights. Walker's Ridge, the Neck, a number of other cemeteries commemorate small battles, horrible battles at very close quarters. And then on top of the hill, two memorials side by side. One, the tall monument, is the New Zealanders' main memorial. This is where their Anzac Day ceremonies take place. Next to it, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the leader of the troops on Gallipoli. He went on to become the founder of the modern Turkish state. Just below them, another cemetery, this time for the New Zealanders. Nearby, trenches filled up but still meandering, still so close together you can wander through there. The Turks have built some more modern ones mainly for educational purposes, and one of them leads down the spit towards Suvla Bay in the distance. That's where tens of thousands of British troops gathered during the campaign. Our erudite guide, Lutfi, introduced me to an old friend that he sees on every trip. This old Turkish gentleman keeps a small stall and shows visitors like us remnants that he still finds on the battlefield to this day. Back towards Lone Pine, and then over the ridge, and on the other side, the Dardanelles. The purpose of the campaign was to take this seaway. Instead, it was a futile campaign with massive losses of life. The Turks lost 60,000 men defending their own land. Australia's losses, more than 8,000. New Zealand, 2,700 and more. It was our baptism of fire.